Hey there, welcome. Tonight, we're settling into a quiet evening in Freya's humble Mead hall. Because even gods need a place to complain about their problems over questionable alcohol. Before we settle in, let me know in the comments what small, strange thing helps you fall asleep. Now, get comfortable, and let's begin. You trudge through slush and twilight, each step a slow squelch as meltwater seeps into the seams of your boots. The path is barely marked, just a few flattened reeds and a suspiciously smug-looking crow overhead. In the distance, smoke curls lazily into the icy dusk sky, and there's a sound, somewhere between a chortle and a song, that lures you toward it like a campfire. Lures lost hikers in horror stories. Except this isn't horror, not quite. Freya's Mead Hall is smaller than expected. Humble, yes, but not shabby. Timber walls lean slightly inward, as if whispering secrets, and the moss-choked thatch above has clearly withstood more than one tantrum from Thor. Outside the door, an elk skull watches you. You knock once. The door creaks open by itself, because of course it does. Inside, the warmth hits you like a grandmother's hug. Smoky air curls with the scents of juniper, wet wool, and slow-cooked reindeer haunch, basted with honey and something you sincerely hope is not pine tar. A few heads turn. No one scowls. This is promising. Take off your boots, a voice says, not unfriendly, but with the same tone someone might use when reminding you not to sit on their taxidermized links. You obey, partly out of manners, partly because your toes have staged a mutiny and refuse to move further. The wooden floor is warm, oddly so. You wander closer to the hearth, where logs hiss and crackle in protest of their fiery fate. Around it, a loose assortment of beings, some human, some less confidently so, gather. A woman with tangled gold hair and a necklace like moonlight meets your gaze. She doesn't smile. Freya, she says, not needing to say more. She gestures to a cushion beside her. You sit, trying to look casual and failing, because your knee cracks like a lightning-struck tree. Someone offers you a horn. You accept without asking what's in it. A mistake, possibly. But then again, it's a mistake, with cinnamon and a back-end kick, like a cheerful mule. Not bad. Someone next to you whispers that Freya doesn't usually entertain guests. Not unless she's bored, or the boars have been too chatty, or both. Historians still argue whether the goddess preferred solitude or spectacle. But the room around you suggests she relishes a bit of both. Stories told in the flickering half-light, shared with strangers who may or may not leave quite the same. A young man roasts something over the fire. You ask what it is. He replies with a shrug and the word mystery. You wisely decide not to probe. To your right, someone is playing a three-string lyre, badly. To your left, a girl feeds embers with dried apple peelings and murmurs what might be a blessing or an oddly specific insult. The room pulses with old magic and new jokes, wrapped in the mundane loveliness of a quiet evening where nothing important has to happen. You exhale. It's the kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding for months, maybe years. Your spine begins to loosen. So does the iron band around your thoughts. Here, under Freya's roof, the world feels paused, not halted, just muffled. A draft creeps along the floor. You pull the blanket tighter. The fabric is scratchy, hand-woven, and stained in places where clearly a goat got too curious. You don't mind. There's something authentic in the imperfect. Some say the Vanir gods, Freya's people, were always more comfortable in the messy truths of life than in the pristine myths of their Aesir rivals. Who needs golden halls when you've got good soup and even better gossip? A child toddles by clutching a stuffed boar with one eye and a mouthful of straw. Someone has clearly read the sagas too literally. A few feet away, a one-eyed cat watches from the rafters. You try not to think too hard about that. First time, Freya asks, eyes crinkling with amusement. A man beside you starts explaining how reindeer were once considered semi-sacred in northern rites, how their blood was thought to carry the northern lights themselves, or their cholesterol, he adds, chuckling. Depends which scholar you ask. You wonder if he's joking. It's hard to tell in a place where belief and absurdity sit drinking from the same horn. A low murmur rises around you. Not conversation exactly, more like a contented hush, punctuated by the occasional snort of laughter or the clink of ceramic against wood. Outside, snow continues to melt in sluggish rivulets, and wind slithers against the walls like an old lover come to call. Freya's presence settles beside you like the weight of thick velvet. Not oppressive, just unmistakable. She doesn't demand attention, she commands it by merely existing, like the moon or a tax audit. Her smile lingers on the edge of amusement, as though she's perpetually watching mortals flounder through their own drama and finding it all very quaint. She pats the floor beside her throne, or what passes for one. It's a high-backed chair carved from antler and ash wood, plainly built but softened with pelts. "Tell me something you regret," she says, entirely too casually for a first conversation. You freeze. "Everyone has one," she adds, sipping from her own horn as though this were a polite icebreaker and not spiritual surgery. "The gods keep theirs deep. The mortals wear theirs like tattoos." You flounder for a safe answer, finally mumbling something about having once bought a cursed spoon off a dodgy antiquities dealer. Her eyes sparkle. "Good. Regret with flair. That's rare." The others nearby chuckle knowingly. As Freya leans forward, a strand of hair falls loose, catching the firelight with a glimmer not unlike morning dew or freshly unsheathed sarcasm. She smells faintly of birch sap, peat smoke, and something unplaceably electric, like thunder hiding in silk. Behind her, a woven tapestry hangs unevenly on the wall. You can't help staring. Its colors are muted, ochre, ash gray, dull lapis, and it depicts what seems to be an enormous cat dragging a chariot through fields of barley. "Ah," she says, following your gaze, "Tofner and Hogni, lazy beasts, but dramatic." The tapestry is full of little touches, embroidered crows wearing eyeglasses, a tiny frog drinking mead, a woman braiding lightning into her hair. You wonder aloud whether these details were part of the original mythos or added later by an imaginative hand. Historians still argue whether our sagas evolved naturally or were edited for political flavor. Freya murmurs, her tone somewhere between nostalgia and snide. Snorri was a clever man, too clever. At her feet lies a sleeping boar. There's definitely tusks, but also a suspiciously glowing snout. You don't ask questions. You've learned. Another guest, a short, rotund woman wrapped in wool, pipes up from across the hall, launching into a story about the time Freya crashed a midsummer wedding disguised as a goose. There's laughter. Someone claims they still have the feathered slippers. You politely decline the offer to try them on. Freya waves a hand, and someone passes her a carved wooden box. From it, she produces a small figurine, delicate silver, shaped like a woman with a falcon's head. "This is one of the oldest known amulets in my name," she says, "found in a field, beneath a privy, if I'm honest." She leans over to show you. The detail is astonishing. Tiny etchings show the figure holding what may be a staff or possibly a rolled-up divorce decree. "The past is never where we left it," she says softly, "but sometimes it leaves souvenirs." You ask whether she misses being worshipped. The silence stretches just long enough to be uncomfortable. "I miss being remembered accurately," she replies. "There's a difference." One of the children nearby begins to hum an old tune, lilting and minor keyed. Freya joins in under her breath. You notice a carved fox head just above Freya's seat. It's grinning, wide and toothy, with little polished amber stones for eyes. "Trickster gift," she says. "Loki gave it to me on a dare." "Did you keep it out of sentiment?" you ask. "No," she says, "because it bites thieves." Across the hall, someone tries to sneak an extra roll from the breadbasket. The fox's mouth creaks open, just enough for the warning to land. The conversation drifts again, naturally, like smoke toward rafters. Someone recounts a story of the Vanir War, describing it less as a cataclysm and more as an awkward family reunion with flung spears instead of flung insults. Insults came first. You learn the war ended, not with conquest, but with exchange. Hostages sent both ways. Freya and her brother Freyr went to Asgard. In return, Mimir and Henir were sent to Vanaheim, a trade deal wrapped in divine diplomacy. Still, she says, historians debate whether it was peace or just long-term babysitting. The boar at her feet snorts and rolls over. You startle. Freya doesn't miss a beat. That one dreams of onions. Don't ask why. You take a sip from your horn and realize someone's refilled it when you weren't looking. This mead is different, spicier, with a whisper of apples and something that tastes oddly like regret on a summer night. You wonder if it's enchanted. You wonder if you care. Stay until the fire dies, Freya says, her eyes softening. You nod. And as the flames flicker against the antler throne, you feel, for the first time in a long while, that staying still is not a failure, but a form of worship. You don't quite remember how your horn got topped up again, but there it is, brimming and warm against your palm, humming faintly like an affectionate beehive. The mead, amber and alive with spice, smooths out your thoughts until they slide gently off the edges of worry. It's the kind of drink that promises good dreams and mild regret, assuming you wake up remembering any of it. Freya raises her own cup in a lazy salute and turns her attention to the skald, now warming up beside the hearth. He's a wiry man with a mustache, so long it could double as reins, and eyes that seem to blink independently, like owls trying to agree on something. He clears his throat with the gravity of a man about to share sacred truth, then immediately loses his train of thought trying to rhyme Thor with floor. Poetry's not meant to be perfect, he says, grinning through crooked teeth. It's meant to stick to your ribs, like goat stew. Freya sighs and waves him on. He begins again, this time choosing a tale about Loki disguising himself as a fish to escape a wedding. Halfway through, he misquotes a line from the poetic Edda, shrugs, and adds, "Well, that's how my grandmother told it." Historians still argue whether oral traditions preserved history or simply made it more interesting. Judging by the skald's delivery, which involves interpretive dance and something that might technically be a cartwheel, you're inclined toward the latter. You glance around. Everyone is listening, but not all are believing. Some laugh at the embellishments, some nod solemnly. One very old man mutters corrections under his breath. Another scrawls runes into the condensation on his tankard, possibly keeping score. The skald pauses for dramatic effect and launches into a theory involving Odin's missing eye, a frost giant's goat, and a poorly phrased wish. The crowd bursts out laughing, but a scholar near the corner with ink-stained fingers leans in and says, "You know, there's actually a fringe theory that Odin's eye didn't go to Eswell but into a mirror trapped beneath Yggdrasil." He says it like a fact, but his eyes dart nervously, as if the mirror might be listening. A dog barks outside. Everyone goes quiet. Freya raises a brow, but doesn't rise. The door remains closed. The dog stops barking. "Well," says the skald, breaking the silence, "that's probably fine." You ask Freya if the stories change with each telling. "Of course," she replies. "Would you trust a tale that stayed the same after crossing a dozen lips and 2 mountains?" She laughs softly. "My brother once told a story so often it looped back and ended with me marrying a pumpkin. I didn't." You sip your mead and murmur something about mythology being flexible. "No," she corrects gently, "memory is flexible. Myth just makes use of it." A younger woman approaches the hearth with a bundle of scrolls and a scowl. "They've found another version of the apple tree dream," she announces, "in a bog, on a sheep's rib." Murmurs rise. This is apparently news. She unrolls the sheep rib transcription carefully, revealing tight, spiraling runes. The room draws close to inspect. Freya spelled apple with a worm rune. Either they meant serpent or someone was drunk. A chorus of approving nods. Mead is poured. A toast is made to drunken scribes and their weird, wormy apples. The skald picks up again, this time reciting a short verse about Yngvi, ancestor of kings, supposedly birthed by a cloud and a sunbeam. It's suspiciously romanticized, and a few eyebrows rise in collective skepticism. Never happened, Freya mutters. His mother was a miller's daughter with very loose ethics and a stronger left hook than Thor. You chuckle, perhaps too loudly, and spill a bit of your mead. It trickles down your wrist, sticky and warm, like liquid nostalgia. Someone passes you a cloth. It's embroidered with the likeness of a walrus wearing a crown. You decide not to ask. Later, as the laughter dies down and the fire lowers into its deep orange stages, you catch sight of a shelf behind the throne. It's filled with clay tablets, bone carvings, and a single battered copy of Beowulf with teeth marks in the spine. Someone once tried to ban that book here, Freya says. Following your gaze, said it glorified violence. I said it glorified dental hygiene. Have you read those Grendel bits? Lot of biting. You can't help but ask if all the tales tonight are true. They're honest, she replies. Truth is a matter of sequence. Honesty is a matter of tone. Another round of mead. A second skald joins the first. The two attempt a duet that quickly devolves into friendly insult. They rhyme Emir with slimy ear and Sif's braid with tax evasion paid. Someone else chimes in with a kazoo, which feels anachronistic, but no one stops them. Through all the commotion, you realize Freya has not told a single story herself. Do you not share your own tales? You ask, a little emboldened. I share when it matters, she replies, and only when someone asks the right question. You think for a moment, then, softly, what was your favorite lie ever told about you? She smiles slowly, the kind of smile that travels from mouth to memory. That I cry tears of gold, she says. It's not true. You wait. It's better than true. And then she drinks. You stretch your legs just slightly, mindful of the glowing boar, the aggressively musical scalds, and that uncanny fox carving still eyeing the breadbasket like it holds secrets. As your foot brushes the floor, something catches. Your heel snags on a groove in the wood, narrow and sharp, like an ancient wound. You lean forward, curious now. The grooves aren't random. They're carved, interlocked in tidy rows and arcs. Some resemble runes, others form spirals, half buried beneath hand-woven rugs and the settled dust of centuries. You lift a corner of one rug, just a little, and there it is, a grid of carved symbols that doesn't quite match anything you've seen in any museum, gift shop, or overpriced esoteric Tumblr. Freya notices, of course. She always notices. Don't worry, she says, not entirely comfortingly. It's not currently active. You clear your throat and pretend to stretch again, dropping the rug back in place as casually as one can drop a textile hiding a forgotten ritual matrix. Sacrificial floor, she explains, sipping her drink, used to be in a much more dramatic location. Mountain peak, lightning, screaming, you know. But I repurposed it. Bit of sanding, new floorboards. No one expects theology beneath their toes. She claps once, and a man emerges from the shadows, shirtless, barefoot, probably part goat, carrying a tray of pickled fish and rye cakes. Dinner, Freya says, tastes better when you know it's served over the bones of empire. Someone nearby chokes slightly on their drink. The guests laugh, but not nervously. No one here seems unsettled by history lurking just beneath the surface. Maybe it's because they live with it, step over it daily. Or maybe it's the mead. You ask if the carvings are original. Some are added, like graffiti, but religious. She gestures to one in particular, a crooked spiral flanked by the rune for self, and another that could mean blessing or mild electrocution, depending on pronunciation. That one, she says. Someone scratched it in during a storm, claims it kept the house from being struck, or cursed, or both. Historians still argue, someone mutters, from behind a stack of salted herring. You kneel, running your fingers over one symbol in particular. It's shaped like an hourglass, tipped on its side, an ancient infinity loop cut deep into the grain. Memory rune, Freya says, though not the one they teach in fancy rune schools. This one doesn't store memories, it leaks them. Walk too long over it, and you'll dream someone else's past. You stand up quickly, brushing off your knees. The goat-footed server offers you a rye cake in solidarity. It's surprisingly delicious. Later, As the room settles into a warm lull, a tall woman with frost-bitten hair sits cross-legged on the floor and pulls a bundle from her satchel. It's a map, hand-drawn and imperfect, of early Norse settlements, or maybe future ones. It's hard to tell. In one corner, Freya is depicted not as a goddess, but as a towering tree with eyes. Some called her the Axis, the woman says. Like Yggdrasil, but more personal, less bark, more bite. The goddess shrugs. It's flattering, but I never bore 9 realms. Just a few scandalous secrets, and one very embarrassing festival. A small girl near the fire whispers to her mother, asking if the floor will whisper back when she sleeps on it. Her mother hushes her gently and lays a blanket down, not directly over any of the runes. You notice, your horn is refilled again. You didn't ask, you never do. It's just always enough. You ask Freya how the floor ended up here. Long story, she replies. Short version. After the Vanir War, certain relics had to be hidden, not destroyed, just tucked away. And what better place to hide something sacred than under muddy boots, spilled stew, and 3 generations of domestic squabbles? You nod. Makes sense. Besides, she adds, it keeps nosy archaeologists guessing. There's a long, comfortable pause, the kind you only get in a place where no one's performing. You stretch again, slower this time, letting your hand trail along the grain of the old wood. Some of the lines seem newer, sharper, cleaner. You ask whether the floor is still being written. Always, Freya says. Every footfall is another line, and just like that, you stop, stepping casually. You realize even your shuffle, your sleepy stumble, has joined some larger rhythm, one that predates you and will outlast you. Someone passes around a dish of cloudberries soaked in mead. They taste like sunsets on cold mornings, tart and tender. An older man begins to sing, a low chant, not meant to entertain but to anchor. The room hums with it, quietly. The melody isn't beautiful, not by normal standards. It's raw, honest. You recognize no words, and yet something in your chest shifts, like loose earth over buried stone. You glance again at the tapestry, the fox's teeth, the cracked bowl near the hearth. Everything here is layered. The skald leans over. Did you know, he whispers, that some believe these runed floors once moved, rotated beneath dancing feet, aligning with stars and stories? He grins, coarse, that might have been the mushrooms. You start to ask what kind of mushrooms. He just winks. Later still, as the fire sighs into embers and shadows grow longer, Freya lays a hand flat on the floor, not performatively, just gently, like you might touch the skin of an old friend. This floor has heard more prayers than I've ever answered, she says, and more laughter than I ever deserved. The goat-footed man nods solemnly and refills the breadbasket. Somewhere above, the rafters creak, not in warning, but in memory. And beneath you, the floor listens. The hearth crackles lower now, its flames drawn inward like a yawning beast preparing for slumber. Around you, the hall dips into a softer rhythm. Mugs rest half full on the floor, cloaks bunch behind tired backs, and the occasional snore has begun to slip through the lulls in conversation. But Freya sits upright still, spine straight, gaze distant, as if the fire has summoned something from far beyond this hall and time. You blink, and her expression shifts, from amused hostess to something older, quieter. She leans forward, letting the firelight paint her cheekbones in shadow and gold. This hearth remembers more than I do, she says. Every log that burns here brings a story to the surface. Some rise, like smoke. Others stay behind. You sip your drink and say nothing. There's a weight in her tone that makes interruption feel like sacrilege. Watch, she murmurs. So you do. The flames twist suddenly, a shudder running up the chimney like a spine straightening. Sparks leap, not up, but sideways, and with them, the room shimmers. Not changes, not quite, but ripples. Like the present moment was printed too hastily and the ink is starting to bleed. And then, in the flickering firelight, the visions begin. Not ghosts, not hallucinations. Memories coaxed from the wood, the smoke, the runes beneath your feet. Scenes bubble up. A bloodied warrior, kneeling before the hearth, hands open in surrender. A woman with seaweed in her hair, weaving storm charms into a shawl. A priest carving runes into his palms and whispering to something he can't quite see. Freya watches all of this without blinking. These are the bits that don't make it into the sagas, she says. The messy bits. The bits that smell like sweat and birch smoke and fear. One memory glows brighter. A younger Freya, barefoot, braid wild, dancing in the middle of the hall, with a ring of children circling her. They're chanting something nonsensical, giggling, tossing herbs in the air like confetti. She's laughing. Not the dry, sardonic laugh of today, but a bubbling sound, full and light. You feel oddly emotional. That was before the war, she says. Before Asgard. Before the politics. We danced more back then. For rain, for crops, for reasons we forgot halfway through. You glance at her, trying to gauge how much of this is performance. But her eyes are focused on the flames, not you. Historians still argue whether the Vanir ever practiced sacrifice, she adds, voice cool again. Depends on who's doing the translating and who's funding their museum. She lifts a poker and nudges the wood. The fire growls, sparks leap, and a new image flashes. A circle of figures in cloaks, humming low, passing a bowl between them. Inside, something black glistens. Blood magic, she says, seeing your face. Rare, dangerous, and always a bit theatrical. We preferred song, mostly. You mutter something about songs being safer. Tell that to Bragi, she says. He once sang so well, a bear tried to marry him. You're not sure if it's a joke, probably, hopefully. A skald near the fire begins to hum again. The same chant as before, but slower now, stretched thin across the crackle of embers. The flames respond, rising in rhythm with his voice. Freya snaps her fingers. The vision collapses. Just like that, it's gone, snuffed like a match, and the room is a hall again. Just warmth, wood, and the faint smell of pine resin and something sweet baking on a stone at the far wall. Your breath leaves you. It's the kind of exhale that drags a little too much with it. Freya turns to you. Memory is the oldest magic, and the most unstable. You ask if she ever gets tired of remembering. Of course, she says, but forgetting comes at a cost. She draws a finger through the ash at the hearth's edge, sketching a rune you don't recognize. It vibrates faintly, not in your ears, but somewhere behind your ribs. Then it fades. You ask what it meant. Silence, she replies. A dangerous thing when placed in the right spot. Another figure steps forward, quiet until now. She's wiry, cloaked in matted fur, and carries a bundle of sticks and bones, arranged like a bouquet. She bows low to Freya, murmuring a few words in Old Norse, or maybe something older, and adds her bundle to the fire. The flames shift again, but only briefly. This time, they show a frozen lake, 3 women walking backward across it, speaking riddles into the ice. Freya narrows her eyes. That one, I do remember. Terrible singers. The vision dissolves. Laughter bubbles up once more, cautiously. A cup clinks gently near the wall. Someone opens a jar of lingonberries and passes it around like an offering. Another places a braid of garlic near the door. Tradition, you assume, or very specific superstition. You look down again at the floor. The runes beneath your seat seem to pulse in rhythm with your breath, or the hearth, or your thoughts. It's unclear. You ask if the fire ever lies. Freya chuckles. Fire never lies. It just doesn't always answer the question you asked. She stands then, for the first time all evening, and stretches, slow and deliberate. Her joints crack softly, like kindling catching flame. I've told enough truth for one night, she says. Let someone else burn their memories for a change. She steps back, letting the room breathe around her again. The skald begins a new song, quieter than before. You don't understand the words, but the melody settles around you like moss, safe, heavy, kind. And as the hearth glows gently, no longer dancing with ghosts, you close your eyes for just a second and swear you hear someone whisper your name in the crackle, not in menace, in memory. The scent hits first, rich and heavy, like meat seared in a pan, seasoned with stories. It winds through the hall, curling around the sleepy air and coaxing guests back to upright positions. Whatever had begun baking near the stone wall is now finished, and its smell is impossible to ignore. Boar, spiced and basted. The kind of aroma that makes your stomach politely remind you that it has needs, and they're increasingly urgent. Freya has returned to her seat, now wrapped in a cloak the color of moss after rain. She lifts one eyebrow as a clay platter is carried in, steaming and crackling, covered in a thin veil of herbs and braided leeks. You'll want to eat this slowly, she warns, unless you've recently made oaths and aren't keen to keep them. You blink. Someone beside you nods solemnly. Boar fat's binding, they whisper. Old Vanir belief. It latches onto promises, makes them stick. You think about that. Consider the half-formed promises you've muttered over the years. Resolutions made on hangovers, intentions scrawled in journals. You wonder which ones the boar might remember. The dish is set down on a low, ancient table that looks as though it has been through several marriages and at least one duel. Plates are passed, mismatched and chipped, but cleaned with care. Freya insists that the first serving go to the house. She nods toward a quiet corner where no one sits, and a loaf of bread is laid gently on an empty bench. You say nothing. It feels respectful to leave that one unexplained. The boar meat is sliced with a knife that looks ceremonial, but cuts like it's seen its share of root vegetables and divine disputes. You're handed a thick piece, resting on a hunk of dark bread. You bite in, and it's exactly what you hoped. Smoky, salty, tender, with a whisper of sweetness. Juniper, maybe, or applewood, possibly magic. Someone toasts to the boar, and everyone drinks. Someone else toasts to digestion, and people drink again. A third toast, to whatever lies we'll tell ourselves about second helpings, earns the biggest cheer. A woman with a long silver braid explains how certain feasts in Vanir tradition weren't just for nourishment, they were contracts. To break bread was to swear peace, she says, and to burn bread was a warning, or just bad baking, Freya mutters. The hall warms again, but now with the rhythm of a feast, hands reaching, laughter rising, someone playing a lute with more confidence than talent. Every few minutes, Freya taps her cup and adds a small, glinting thing to a bowl by her side. Bits of metal, dried berries. What might be teeth, you don't ask. Historians still argue whether these ritual offerings were for the Vanir gods themselves, or for the landwights, the unseen spirits of place and field. Here, no one seems to distinguish between the two. Spirits are spirits, and all of them appreciate a good meal. You take another bite, this one crisped at the edge. The boar must have been enormous. You wonder aloud if it was one of Freya's own. She raises an eyebrow. Don't be ridiculous, she says. Is too vain to be eaten. He'd haunt the gravy. Talk turns to seasonal dishes. There's a debate over which herb best honors Enjar. One faction insists on dill. Another claims only wild thyme will do. A third says Enjar doesn't care, as long as the fish is fresh and the wind doesn't smell like seagull regrets. You'd be surprised how fussy sea gods can be, someone mutters. A child asks what the Vanir used to serve during ceremonies. Mostly what we had, says an older man, which was root vegetables, salted things, and a prayer that it wouldn't rain halfway through the blessing. Freya chuckles. And fermented birch sap. More of that than we should have. A jar is passed your way, pale liquid. Smells like bark and courage. You sip. It tastes like tree tears and the first day of spring. It also burns. A lot. Somewhere in the hall, someone drops a spoon. A collective wince. Then laughter. It's fine, Freya says, unless it landed upright. Then someone's lying. Everyone stares at the spoon. It is slightly tilted. A chorus of joking accusations ensues. A woman confesses to stealing a bread roll earlier. A man admits to pretending to understand runes. Someone else says they once tried to impersonate Freya to get free mead in Uppsala. Did it work? Freya asks. Until I tripped over a goat and insulted a bishop. Classic, she nods. dessert arrives with little fanfare, a kind of cake made from oats, honey, and what might be lingonberry, or might be something more adventurous. You eat it anyway. There are worse ways to go. As people grow drowsier and stories drift like steam, Freya starts braiding something, thin strips of bark and hair, twisted with surprising delicacy. She doesn't explain. No one asks. The braid is laid beside the hearth, near the rune that leaks memories. You suspect there's a connection. Bark oaths, she says, catching your glance. Hold better than words. There's a silence after that, not empty, just full of warmth, meat, stories, promises, and a collective sigh that settles into the bones. You pat your stomach, which now contains at least one sacred animal, and possibly a minor, packed with destiny. You feel heavy, but in a good way, like a stone in a riverbed that's finally found the right spot to rest. Tomorrow, Freya says, you'll forget how full you were, but your soul will remember. Feast magic always lingers. The boar's bones are collected, wrapped in cloth, and taken away. No scraps, no waste. Someone whispers a blessing. You catch only 2 words: return and thanks. A final round of mead is poured. This batch is darker, thicker. It tastes like endings. And somewhere, far off, a wolf howls, not ominous, just present. You lean back, full and quiet, and let the fire pull your gaze once more. The thunder doesn't begin with a bang. It begins with a sigh. A low, rumbled exhale that rattles the ceiling beams and causes a few goblets to shiver in their owner's hands. The mead hall quiets, gradually, not in fear, but in recognition. This isn't unusual. The gods are nothing if not theatrical, and the weather loves a good entrance. Freya looks up, expression unreadable. He's in a mood, she says. You assume she means Thor, because who else throws tantrums loud enough to shake the sky like a toddler with a lightning rattle? Outside, rain starts, like it's been holding back all evening just to be dramatic at the perfect moment. It slaps the roof in dense, rhythmic bursts. The smell of wet pine and peat seeps in through the cracks, and someone bolts the door more out of habit than necessity. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and shift on your bench. An old thing, rough-hewn, and a little too uneven to be purely furniture. You realize too late that this is the bench. The one someone earlier warned you about. The one that, apparently, whispers omens. It's unusually cold beneath you, despite the fire's warmth, and something in the grain feels wrong, not splintered. Intentional. You lean slightly forward, just enough to hear. At first, nothing. Then, a whisper. But not words, exactly, just the impression of a phrase, half forgotten before it finishes. He will not knock twice. You shift again, hoping to feel more comfortable. You do not. Freya watches with thinly veiled amusement. Ah, the seer's seat. I'd forgotten that was still active. You look at her sharply. Don't worry, she says, waving a hand. It doesn't always speak. Sometimes, it just judges, silently. You consider standing, but now it feels like the bench might take offense. Best to stay respectful. Maybe offer it a crumb or 2. A thin woman in a green shawl approaches the hearth and sets down a bowl filled with rainwater. Fresh from the roof, she says. For scrying, several guests lean in, intrigued. The woman peers into the bowl, and her face hardens. Someone here is going to lose a shoe. A pause, then general confusion. A few people check their feet. Freya raises a brow. Specific, but important. Last time someone lost a shoe here, we had to negotiate a treaty between 3 owls and a disgruntled spirit. Historians still argue whether that owl pact ever held, the skald mutters, shaking his head. You glance back at the bench. It's still cold, still watching, in a way. A child approaches and taps it twice. Nothing, he shrugs. It only talks to people who need to hear something. Helpful. Lightning flashes, briefly illuminating the carved beams above. You hadn't noticed before, but one of them is covered in tiny runes, worn nearly smooth. You ask what they say. A warning, says the old man nearby, swirling his drink. Something about dreams and thresholds. or thresholds and dreams. Depends which way you read it. You squint up at the markings. The words seem to shift under your gaze, not in motion, but in meaning. You blink. The fire flares, unprovoked. Freya stands and moves toward the center of the hall. She doesn't shout. She doesn't need to. Tonight is a night of crossings, she says. Storms don't just bring weather, they bring edges. She gestures to the bowl, where ripples have formed though no one has touched it. Time runs thin during thunder, and thinner still during mead. Someone laughs. Someone else spills their drink. From a corner, an old seer steps forward, white-eyed, hunched, and reeking of nettles. He begins humming a single note. It vibrates low and constant. It's not pleasant, but it feels important. People begin setting objects near the bowl. Tokens, feathers, bits of bone, a half-eaten pastry. You're handed a stone, smooth and heavy, with a carved line across its center. For balance, you place it near the bowl and, for a moment, feel strangely lighter, like something left you, or chose to wait behind. You look at Freya. She nods, once, satisfied. The storm continues, but the fear doesn't grow. Instead, the hall takes on a feeling of rightness, of ritual. Not the formal kind with robes and awkward chanting, but the ancient, familial sort, eating together during thunder, listening for signs in wind and creek. Someone begins telling a story, this time about the first time a human tried to outwit a seer. Spoiler, it went poorly. They misinterpreted a goat's sneeze as a sign of wealth and ended up married to a fishmonger. The lesson: don't mess with omens, especially when goats are involved. You glance again at the bench. It's warmer now, still strange, but no longer judging. Freya settles beside you, pulling her cloak tighter. You hear anything useful? She asks. You tell her about the whisper. She chuckles. They say that phrase, to everyone, means you've started listening. Thunder rumbles again, the fire hisses, the rain thickens, but the hall holds fast. Someone finds a lyre and begins playing a tune that sounds vaguely like rain turned to rhythm. Someone else begins tapping spoons against their plate. The skald hums in harmony. You realize, gradually, that the hall sings during storms. And you're singing, too. Not with your mouth, but with your breath, your bones, your memory. The bench creaks once, gently, and then falls silent. The storm's rumble begins to fade, retreating like a tired beast back to the edges of the world, leaving the air crisp and sharp. Outside, droplets cling to the pine needles, trembling in the slow dance of clearing skies. Inside, the hall breathes out a collective sigh. The tension that had knotted your shoulders loosens, as if the storm took your worries with it. Freya stands and stretches, the soft crackle of her cloak sounding almost like laughter. Storms always stir things up, she says, voice low and calm. In the Vanir's old days, thunder wasn't just weather, it was a signal. You nod, remembering the tales of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, smashing across the sky like a blacksmith's hammer shaping destiny itself. Historians still argue whether the hammer symbolized protection or destruction first, but everyone agrees it's a good excuse to make a lot of noise and eat more. Around you, the guests begin to stir. The skald tunes his lute again, fingers deft despite the wear of the evening. The old seer gathers his few belongings and gives you a knowing nod before slipping quietly out the door, his cloak blending with the dusk. You glance at the hearth. The fire, which had danced with visions only hours ago, now burns, steady and warm. It's less a storyteller tonight, and more a quiet companion, holding the space while voices lower to tired whispers. A woman approaches, holding a small bundle wrapped in linen. She places it gently beside the hearth, a nest of wildflowers, twigs, and something faintly shimmering. An offering, she explains, for Freya's protection through the dark months. Freya smiles softly, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The Vanir loved their offerings, gifts to the land, to the spirits, to the unseen. Sometimes simple things, sometimes strange things. She glances at the shimmering bundle. No one ever really agreed on what counted as strange. You reach out and touch a petal. It feels impossibly delicate, as if the flower might fold itself into a secret and disappear. You ask Freya what happens to offerings after the feast. She shrugs. Some get buried, some burned, some forgotten, sadly, but the magic lingers. Even forgotten magic can be dangerous. There's a silence that stretches like warm honey, thick and slow. You're glad. Glad for quiet, for the soft hum of settling bodies and murmured thanks. Somewhere, the faintest sound of a flute drifts in from outside, a lone melody weaving through the trees. It's haunting and sweet, like the memory of a dream just before waking. Freya's gaze softens. Music, she says, is a bridge between here and elsewhere, between what was and what might be. She stands again, moving toward the door to peer outside. The sky is awash of deep blue and first stars, cool and distant. A breeze stirs the flowers by the hearth, carrying a scent of moss and earth. Historians still argue whether Vanir worshippers believed in an afterlife or something more cyclical, she says, but they all agreed that the land itself was alive, that the meadows and forests remembered you. You think about that, the idea that the earth beneath your feet might hold your name like a whispered secret. It feels comforting and unsettling, all at once. Freya closes the door against the chill and returns to her seat. The hall dims as lamps are lowered, shadows pooling gently in the corners. It's the kind of darkness that feels like a soft blanket, not a threat. You lean back, breathing in the last warm breath of the fire, and let your eyes drift closed. Before sleep claims you fully, you catch a glimpse of movement near the hearth, a flicker of light, too small and quick to be flame, like a smile from the land itself. And with that, you slip into the quiet fold of night. The early morning light creeps slowly through the cracks in the wooden walls, painting thin stripes of gold over the worn floorboards. You wake with a soft start, not to the clatter of battle or the blaring of horns, but to the gentle creak of the hall settling into a new day. A quiet peace lingers, as if the night itself had whispered a lullaby and tucked the world in with care. Freya is already up, tending to the hearth. The fire is small but steady, casting a warm glow that pushes back the cool dawn. She hums softly, a tune that feels both ancient and familiar, as if it's been passed down from a time when the earth was younger and the stars were closer. You watch as she mixes herbs in a small bowl, sage, juniper, and something dark and fragrant you can't quite place. For clearing the mind, she says, without looking up. The Vanir believed that mornings were for renewal, not just of the body, but of the spirit. You nod, rubbing the sleep from your eyes and stretching out the stiffness from the night's rest. Outside, the forest is waking, the birds beginning their morning chorus. There's something about the way the light filters through the branches that makes you think the world itself is breathing in deeply, ready for whatever the day will bring. Freya pours a steaming cup of something herbal and hands it to you. The taste is sharp and sweet, with a hint of earthiness, like drinking the forest itself. Historians still argue whether these herbal brews were everyday medicine or part of sacred ritual, she muses. Probably a bit of both. You sip slowly, feeling the warmth spread through you like a quiet promise. The hall begins to stir, guests waking, voices low and tentative as the fog of sleep lifts. Someone starts a fire in the corner. Another prepares bread dough for the day's baking. The rhythm of the hall feels familiar, like an old song you've forgotten the words to, but remember the melody. You find yourself drawn outside, where the air is crisp and clean. The dew clings to the grass, sparkling like tiny jewels. The scent of pine and wet earth is intoxicating, grounding you in a way that feels both ancient and immediate. Freya follows, her cloak pulled tight against the morning chill. She points toward a small clearing where a cluster of stones stands, weathered and moss-covered, like silent sentinels guarding secrets. These are the old Vanir markers, she explains. Some say they're graves, others say they're places of power. Historians still argue whether they were built by humans or the gods themselves. You kneel beside one, running your fingers over the cool stone. There's a faint pulse, almost like a heartbeat, or maybe it's just your imagination. The air feels thick with stories waiting to be told. As you stand, a gust of wind stirs the leaves, carrying with it a faint melody, the same haunting tune from last night's flute, weaving through the trees like a thread connecting past and present. Freya smiles softly. The land remembers, she says, and so do we. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of the night's feast and the promise of a new day blending together in a quiet harmony. The Mead Hall, the storm, the offerings, they all feel like pieces of a larger story, one that you're only beginning to understand. As you walk back toward the hall, the scent of baking bread greets you, warm and inviting. Inside, the fire crackles cheerfully, and the guests begin to gather once more, ready to share the stories of the night and the hopes of the day. You settle back into your seat, feeling the steady rhythm of the hall around you, a heartbeat as old as the stones and as gentle as the dawn. The hall grows quieter as the afternoon slips toward evening. The sun hangs low, casting long shadows that stretch like lazy cats across the wooden floor. You find yourself sinking deeper into the worn bench, the weight of the day pressing pleasantly against your limbs. The stories, the storm, the food, they've woven together into something that feels less like an event and more like a memory in the making. Freya moves among the guests with a calm grace, her presence like a steady anchor in the soft ebb of twilight. She listens more than she speaks, her eyes catching moments others might miss. The flicker of a smile, the shiver of a shrouded thought, the warmth of a shared glance. It's the kind of leadership that doesn't shout. It hums, quietly powerful. You notice the offerings from last night, now wrapped carefully and placed near the door. Someone has added a sprig of holly and a small, polished stone. It strikes you as a delicate conversation between the old and the new, a bridge built from respect and hope. Freya catches your gaze and nods. Tradition isn't about repeating the past exactly, she says softly. It's about listening to what the past wants to tell us now. A child runs past, chasing a moth caught in the amber light. Their laughter is pure and untamed, the kind of sound that slips under your skin and lingers like a good tune. The fire burns low, sending sparks up the chimney like tiny fireflies taking flight. You lean back, eyes half closed, letting the quiet soak in. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, not the threatening kind, but a soft, questioning hoot that seems to ask, "Are you still here?" You are, and you know you will be, long after the last ember fades. Historians still argue about the exact role mead halls played in shaping Viking culture. Were they merely gathering places, or the very heart of social and political life? Here, you don't have to choose. The hall is everything it's meant to be. Shelter, stage, sanctuary. As darkness settles fully, you feel the weight of the evening's magic. Subtle, persistent, like the pull of tides you can't see but always feel. Freya stands once more, moving to the hearth to tend the final flames. She looks over the room with a gentle smile, the kind that says, "We've done well tonight." You realize that you don't want this moment to end. But endings are just beginnings in disguise. And as the hall breathes its last warmth into the night, you close your eyes and let the stories wrap around you like a soft cloak. The whispers of the old stones, the laughter of children, the crackle of fire, all fold together in a lullaby only the heart can hear. And with that, you drift into dreams, into memory, into the quiet promise of tomorrow. Slow now and breathe out the day's last moments. Feel the gentle pulse of the hearth fade into a soft, steady calm. The warmth lingers on your skin like a familiar embrace. Let your thoughts settle like autumn leaves, soft and slow. Remember that the world is wide, but here, now, you are safe, surrounded by stories that hold you gently. Close your eyes and float on the gentle current of peace. Tomorrow waits, but tonight you rest in this quiet, sacred space.